Welcome back, everyone, and I have another location for you guys to consider, and it's all things regarding Benalla. Now, if you're wondering where Benalla is, it's actually a location in Victoria, which is located about 40 minutes away from Shepparton, about 30 minutes from Wangaratta, and another hour away from Albury-Wodonga. So it's actually quite central to other large regional locations. And this location is currently showing a lot of potential for investors. And like always, I will go through the data first behind it. And when we look at Benalla, its buy price is around $460,000. I've seen properties all the way from $400,000 to around $750,000, but you want to get close to the median buy price, and the yield is about 5%. You can definitely get properties above a 5% yield, closer to 5.5, and I will show you an example of that. And when you start to scroll down, we'll look at the key parts of the data. Now, the first thing I do want to call out is the population size, which is around 11,000 people. Now, generally speaking, I don't like to invest into small regional locations, but there have been comments on my YouTube channel to cover this area, so I thought I might as well. And Benalla is in an interesting location because it is so close to proximities of Shepparton, Wangaratta, and as well as Albury-Wodonga. And when we start to look at the data behind it and we look at it over a long time period, we can generally see that the location has performed fairly consistently over a 10-year period and longer, which is a really good sign to see. It's not going through big cycles up and down like a normal mining town would. It has gone through some good consistent growth. It's gone through the flat spot like most of regional Victoria over the past 3 years, and now it's starting to grow again with the 1/4 change at about 1%. Rents haven't really been rising. It's around less than 1%, which is not good at all, but it's a factor you may wish to trade off if you want to consider this area. And we start to scroll down, we can see that the rented to owner occupier ratio is 26. So there's actually a lot of owners in this area, so it is a fairly livable location. And when we start to look at the affordability index, it's under 30 years, which means this location is extremely affordable for local residents, which means that if prices were still to rise, that means they can still afford this location, which then in turn fuels the market further and further. All positive signs. And when we start to look at the supply and demand metrics, the microeconomics of this location, over the past couple of months, we can see that stock levels have started to reduce, which is a good sign for investors because that means there's less properties on the market, which will eventually lead to capital growth. Now, demand hasn't really picked up as of yet, but I can foresee that in the future that it is likely to grow in value. Not only that, we know that Shepparton has become pretty much a hot market these days, that will naturally flow on to nearby regional locations like Benalla, and I expect to see demand start to improve over the next couple of months. Vacancies is above 2%, which isn't great, but something you may wish to trade off. So when you look at the rental side of things, vacancy is a bit high at 2%, and the rents aren't rising, less than 1%, which means that raising rents in the future will be very unlikely, and you will have further competition if more and more investors come into the market. But overall, inventory is dropping, demand is starting to pick up, not really there just yet, but this will eventually lead to capital growth. And you don't need to just check it on hashtag. You can also see that stock levels in Benalla for this postcode is starting to drop over the past couple of months. Now, it may be a little bit early to call for sure if this is going to turn into a hot market and going to grow massively, but generally speaking, when a state starts to grow, a lot of these small regional locations also grow as a consequence. We have seen this in Queensland, we see this in Perth. So again, a bit early to call, but I think it generally will grow. And like always, guys, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my private community. We have over 300 members within the community helping each other out. We're at literally at $35 a month. It is the cheapest investor community out there that actually provides you tailored information, mentorship, guidance, and access to so much different resources that it makes your property investing journey absolutely easy, right? And we have over 50 reviews, so you guys can go have a read of it yourself. It's an absolute steal. Just try it for a month. If you don't like it, you don't need to come back again, but you have nothing to lose by joining this private community and everything to gain, right? And you can also get a 10% discount if you're on the website long enough. And by the way, guys, I have a free newsletter where I cover different locations, and Benalla was a location I covered back in August. So if you haven't subscribed to this free newsletter, then you're already missing out on the best locations to consider for investment. So make sure you hit that subscribe button because it's absolutely free. And you also get a little gift when you subscribe. And there is so much more to cover about this location. So let's get straight back into the video. Now, the next thing I want to do is talk about Benalla's economy because it is a small regional location. And often we find that these locations are often tied to mining. But for this location, it isn't the case, and I'll get to it. Benalla supports about 6,000 jobs with about a $2.6 billion economic output, which isn't bad at all, and a GRP of around $1.2 billion. So not too bad. Its population has been fairly stagnant. It's not really growing. It's staying relatively stable, and the best thing is that it's not losing any people, which is good to see. And when we start to break this down by industries of employment, we can see that construction, healthcare, manufacturing, agricultural, forestry, fishing are the main employers of this location. and it is fairly diverse. So there's no one sector which is taking up more than 25 to 30% of the location. So it's diversified from that point. And also one other factor we want to look at is its export. What is it producing? Industry is mainly tied to manufacturing, construction, and agriculture, but it's divided into three different sectors, which is good to see because most small regional locations are often tied to mining or agriculture and forestry and fishing, but not this one. Now, there may be some downstream between manufacturing and construction, but overall, it's reasonably diversified for a small location, which is hard to find these days, but this is one of those locations. So from the economy side of things and from the data side of things, it's looking very, very good. Now I'm going to show you an example of a property that you can look at. Now this is an example here right on the market at the time of recording. I'm not too sure when I'll release the video, but 12 Hakea Court in Benalla is being sold for $455,000. And when you look at this property, it is a beautiful brick home, definitely sort of vintage interior, but nothing that will stop you from renting it out straight away. It's in great overall condition, and it can do with the cosmetic reno internally if you wanted to uplift the equity to a higher standard. And something like this is being sold for $450,000. A 3x1 on 700 square meters of land is generally quite perfect. And a property like this will rent for roughly $480, which is 3x2 but furnished. This looks like it's close to a railway maybe. Start to scroll down, $580 for 4x2, $510 for a 3x2 property, very similar sort of functionality. And this one is $580, which seems very odd, seems a little bit high. And another 3x1, $480 per week. So roughly around $480 to $550. Conservatively, you can say around $500 in rent. And so when we put these numbers into the system or the portfolio calculator sheet, you can see a $455 buy price. If you're at a 12% deposit, you're around $80,000 all in. If you're at a 20% deposit, then you're about $120,000 all in. At $500 per rent, it's around a 5.7% yield, which in this day and age is absolutely amazing. However, I must caveat this and say that when you invest into smaller regional locations, you would generally expect it to have a much higher yield. It's just the nature of how it is. And so 5.7% yield is good. I would definitely expect above a 5% yield if I was going to go to a location like this. It's still going to be around negative $1,000 per month or around $600 after tax considerations. But a property like this is extremely affordable in this day and age compared to the likes of Metro Melbourne, which will get around 3 to 4% yields, or Queensland, which is sitting around 4% yields, right? So this is quite affordable. And it's an example of a property that I would consider. It's a nice brick home, most likely built on a concrete slab. Overall, quite nice. And there's one other thing that I do want to talk about. Now, I have made a video separately about the Inland Rail project and my thoughts around it in general, but I think it should be warranted to talk about in this video as well that Benalla does have the Inland Rail construction starting very soon, which will drive the economy, which will make the rental market tighter because people need a place to live. There's construction workers. This will bring money into the economy as well. Its long-term impacts to the local economy of Benalla is unsure. We'll only know about this in the future if there is further investment coming because of the project. I don't think it directly will have that much of an impact in the long term, but in the short term, it will bring jobs from the construction sector into this location. But it is something for you guys to go have a look into a little bit deeper as well. Now, the next thing I do want to talk about is the public housing in Benalla. Now, the main public housing that you want to stay away from is this left-hand corner, south left-hand corner of Benalla. You just don't want to buy a property in this sector. It's just generally where the majority of the public housing is. Now, there is public housing scattered throughout Benalla as well. So make sure you discuss with the local property manager just to make sure you're avoiding buying in a less desirable spot of this location, but you just want to be avoiding this left-hand sector of Benalla. And just before I end this video, there is one last issue that I do want to talk about this location in terms of investment. Overall, it is extremely amazing for such a small regional location, but Benalla is subject to flooding and it has quite a bit of flood zone. As you can see, when you have the floodway overlay as well as the land subject to inundation, you can see that large parts of Benalla are under that flood zone, which leaves only the pink areas for you to consider, which is not much. So if enough investors come in or BAs come in, there's not going to be much stock to be able to choose from. So if you do consider this area, you want to be earlier rather than late. And the floods are no joke to be scoffed at, right? When you look at the history, Benalla does flood in 2022 along with Shepparton, and there was some serious flooding in this location. So you do really want to make sure that you are not purchasing in any of these locations with a flood zone overlay on it. And if you do, then you have to accept that there is a certain amount of risk to it, and you should contact an insurance company to make sure the premiums don't reflect like this extra risk, because then it might not be worth it in terms of the numbers. So that's the main worry with Benalla that you should be considering about. Overall, it is quite a good location for such a small regional town. Now, it's generally beyond my risk appetite. I generally like to stick to larger regional towns like Shepparton, Albury-Wodonga, Bendigo, etc. But if this fits your bill and fits your criteria, then it is something you can consider. And if you have any questions, like always, jump into the private community. I will be there to help you out. We have over 300 members who are willing to help you out. You'll be an absolute fool to not join because it's just steal of a membership. Till next time, thank you very much.